Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we're really happy to have you here today. Something really special that we do from time to time is actually partner with an agency. And I'll tell you what, we've got a special one today with the Small Business Administration. We've been doing this COVID thing for a little bit more than a year, and not too many agencies would ever say in the history of the United States of America have had so many challenges thrown upon them all at once. But we're going to hear some stories we haven't heard before that are going to be, I think, will be really interesting to you. So we'll get right into it. We've got a keynote. We're going to start off in a minute here, and then we have a couple of panels. We're going to have some polling. We're going to keep things very, very interactive for you. And please queue up your questions when you have the opportunity. It should be fantastic. So I'd like to thank our partners over at Veeam and Denodo. They've been both great partners of ATARC for a long time. And I would also like to thank the SBA and Sanjay Gupta, who is the CTO there. He really helped us put this event together. And we have a series of amazing panelists that are really taking time out of their day to join us. So without further ado, I will introduce Keith Bluestein, who's the SBA's Chief Information Officer. And Keith, you want to come on live here? There he is. It looks like you're like on a set somewhere. I like it. You got the company man thing going in the background. How are you doing today, Keith?
Doing just fine. I'm proud to be a corporate sponsor here of SBA.
Yeah, you got that down. I'm really looking forward to your talk, and maybe at the end we can have some time for a few questions. But thanks for coming today.
Sure. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to extend a special thanks to ATARC and their staff and sponsors for hosting the event. I know a lot of work went into preparing for this event by the unsung heroes behind the scenes, and I want to thank you all for attending. Just by being here, you've communicated that you want to learn more, and that says everything about your professionalism. I realize you're all highly engaged business leaders and have to continually make choices on where you allocate your time. That you're willing to spend your time here speaks volumes, and I could not be more appreciative. When Dr. John Zangardi and the ATARC team first approached me about talking through the challenges of COVID-19 and the associated CARES Act, I saw a great opportunity to do kind of a one-year retrospective on where the Small Business Administration was 1 year ago versus where we find ourselves today. The world looks much different, and our mode of operating and delivery capacity has dramatically changed. We have the folks who led the agency transformation and delivery to the U.S. economy here with us today, and they'll share with you the Herculean tasks that their teams performed to deliver for America's small businesses. But let me briefly review some of the larger opportunities that revealed themselves as we percolated in the crucible of CARES Act and the recovery support. So this follows a pattern similar to the economic concept known as creative destruction, sometimes known as Schumpeter's Gale. It's a concept in economics which, since the 50s, has been popularized as a theory in which economic innovation in the business cycle follows a certain pattern. In this particular case, COVID-19 wreaked havoc on the small business community, but simultaneously created new opportunities not only with new small businesses, but also with how the SBA could react and support this community. So let me open up with a statement that SBA certainly did not have the market cornered on CARES Act relief or activity. There were many federal agencies that worked in unison to deliver help to the American small businesses and the American community writ large during the pandemic. Even I was not at SBA when this started. I joined SBA from NASA in June of last year, when much of the heavy lifting was already complete. That said, I've been there through the variety of tune-ups and extensions that Congress has provided, including the most recently assisting our teams with the new grant programs to provide more relief to shuttered venues and restaurants. As much as we would like to catch our breath and catch up, our job is simply filled with constant change. Now, some may say this is a CIO's dream, while others may view it as a nightmare. Regardless of your point of view, SBA has an interesting story to share, as you'll hear today. So starting off in March of 2020, the need to provide financial relief to America's small businesses was a fast-moving national imperative. The agency synonymous with America's small business was the Small Business Administration. Therefore, SBA was ground zero for the legislative effort to provide that relief. Nowhere did the phrase time is of the essence, take on a greater meaning. The leaders you will hear from shortly led the development of an astronomical surge in capacity in a matter of days. There were Paycheck Protection Program or PPP loans through the Office of Capital Access and economic disaster injury loans through the Office of Disaster Assistance. While both were forms of capital infusion to small business, they also came from complex financial systems designed to do different things. Capital access systems work directly with banking partners and needed to expand exponentially while maintaining the conduits to their existing financial ecosystem without overloading the pipes. That was the challenge. That was a challenging task to fulfill. The Office of Disaster Assistance had a similar capacity challenge despite preparing for an exponential surge for some time. In this particular case, ODA had already had a software as a service conduit standing by for a huge surge in disaster needs, such as the one that occurred during the hurricane season in 2017, when Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria hit in rapid succession. Despite planning for a huge surge, few could have forecast the volume of loans that came with the CARES Act relief, and you'll hear more about that in a little bit. The team worked closely with their vendor to scale to the demand very quickly. I bring up these two examples or these two disparate approaches to highlight one of the more obvious lessons learned as the agency overcame the daunting volume of loan and capital demand. Never in SBA's history has there been so much instant loan demand across the nation. While SBA responded with lightning speed, it highlighted the need to have an elastic and scalable response always immediately available. How you ensure you have that reserve capacity without having to pay for the maximum capacity at all times is a challenge we look forward to solving going forward. We know that the virtual environment offers many attractive features and flexibility to CIOs, but we also have to manage them effectively or we'll be consumed by sustainment costs. I think many people can relate to that. Capacity is not free to vendors either. The government industry partnership in taming this vexing situation will be key in solving our future. The scalability challenge highlighted needs not only in the technical capacity realm, but also in the process functionality. SBA has a great many programs for America's small businesses that fill many niches. This means a great deal of tailoring and specific actions for America's small businesses. Now that's great when you're dealing one-on-one, but this can be a barrier to speed when you're dealing with millions, literally millions of requests. While SBA was able to keep up through the truly extraordinary expansion of the loan support workforce, the need for automation was never more obvious. SBA's workforce was the glue that held together the effort as the agency pushed to provide relief to America's small businesses. Now, SBA survived while providing the needed relief, but we need to be even more resilient in the future. We owe it to the people in the American small business community to be able to streamline and exercise efficiencies going forward. So we live in dramatically changing times with respect to technology. Very little we do today cannot be converted to a digital profile. Now that can be a curse, as anyone who's experienced identity theft can attest, but it can also be a huge boon if harnessed properly. Our challenge as technology leaders is to determine what digital footprint we can explore to improve efficiency. The digital entity is not subject to the same limitations as humans, which presents a huge opportunity for efficiency and shifting our legacy workloads. Technologies like artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, and machine learning offer great prospects in the very near future. Now, SB is already piloting some of these efforts to provide the foundation for widespread adoption of automation technologies. We believe that it will make our entire workforce more efficient and effective and will position us to definitely handle the next black swan or 100-year event. One of the many issues we encounter daily was outlined in Martha Heller's book called the Cio Paradox. We're charged with looking into the future and solving for what unknown will, while equally committed to maintaining the legacy of the past in our current systems to sustain business operations. Often it feels like we only have sufficient funds for one or the other, so we have to get very creative in how we satisfy both worlds. That's one of the many reasons why a federal CIO's job is so easy. I want to highlight something I touched on, and I don't want it to slip by. The ability to recruit and onboard literally thousands of employees in a matter of only a handful of weeks, that is an unprecedented event, but the need was there and the people responded. They do vital work, but many of the functions could be automated, which would allow humans to do much more high value work in the future. This is the goal in the end. Maximize the output of the human workforce by supporting them with time and labor saving technology. I'd be remiss if I did not call it another part of the SBA team. When I talk about our team, it's not the sole domain of the government workforce. SBA operates as a partnership with many critical, important vendors. We simply cannot do what we do without a strong workforce comprised of many dedicated personnel that work side by side the government employee team. We saw their drive and willingness to go above and beyond during the period of time after the CARES Act passed. That speaks to where we see our future. SBA will not solve these problems alone. They'll only be vanquished if we go through a concerted joint effort between government and industry. I hope that's not a news flash or a surprise. Those that have partnered with SBA and me previously know that the value that I hold with the industry partnership to solve the wicked problems we so often face in government. I look forward to continuing that journey toward a solution finding evolution as we do go forward. And in closing, I want to again thank the great Americans who pushed through the challenges and delivered relief to America's small businesses in record time. They did that through dint of sheer will and dedication, while nearly instantly standing up digital call centers and provisioning thousands of laptops to enable virtual work almost instantaneously, while developing and provisioning virtual desktop as relief to those who couldn't get a physical device quickly enough. All of this was in some way, shape, or form a product of the digital revolution of which we are a part. Life and change have happened fast in the last year, and it's only going to keep happening faster. It seems like just yesterday that we shifted to nearly 100% remote work overnight, and 12 months later, it's become the norm. So I hope you enjoy hearing from the digital equivalents of the IndyCar drivers coming up. These are technology's version of high speed, low drag. They're the heroes of the revolution at SBA that continues to this day. I appreciate your rapt attention and I hope you enjoy the upcoming speakers and panels. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Keith. Just one question. You covered a lot of interesting points there. Where do you think that SBA, when the pandemic cools off here, hopefully pretty soon, with everybody getting their shots? I actually get mine tomorrow, I think, my first shot. Where do you think the office is, the future, and the workforce is going to compare to maybe before the pandemic?
Well, it's an interesting thing. So even though we talked a lot about digital here, when it comes to the outreach to communities across the nation, we found that in a lot of the locations, people still wanted to have that personal touch. So we're taking a look at right now across the entire agency, okay, where do we need to maintain those presences out there? I think you still want to have that. But simultaneously, we want to sit there and push that digital edge out there so that a lot of the things that people go to the web to use, that we can sit there and enable things via mobility and other technology. So those are things that when we can catch a little bit of a breather, we look at developing those.
Yeah, you'll hopefully you got some vacation plans here pretty soon scheduled out, after you do finish all this transformation and save all these small businesses that you're saving, you and your team. Thank you so much, Keith. Keith Bluestein, the CIO of the Small Business Administration.
Thank you.
Great. And now we get to hear from Keith's team, and not all Keith's team. I think we have some mission folks too, but we'll go to our first panel of the day that I have the pleasure of moderating. We're going to hear about some SBA program office leaders on the actions they undertook and the challenges that they had to overcome in delivering the EDIL and the PPP programs, which you'll hear a little more about. And while keeping, cybersecurity is always paramount. There's so many actors that are going to try to take advantage of any situation, including this one, unfortunately, but it is a reality. So if I can bring on James Rivera and Steve and David. Okay, here we go. And I'll just do some quick intros before we get into it a little bit. And I think we need to change one of those things, Alyssa. But anyway, I'll do some quick introductions. I've got James Rivera, Associate Administrator, Office of Disaster Assistance, SBA. How are you doing today, James? It looks like, I'm just guessing here, but it looks like you're working out of your home office.
Yes, busy as always, but we're doing well. Thank you.
Great. And next we have with us Steve Kucharski. Hopefully I got that right, Steve.
You got it just fine. Yep. Thanks.
Good. I'm not the best at pronouncing names.
No worries.
Director of Office of Performance Systems Management, OPSM, in the Office of Capital Access at SBA. And it looks like, where do you hail from? Are you from this Washington, D.C. area as well, or?
I originally hail from great state of New Jersey, but been in Northern Virginia for a long time. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, welcome. And last but certainly not least, we have David Tozinski. Did I get that right?
Close enough. Tozinski.
Close enough. How do you pronounce your last name?
Tozinski.
Tozinski. Okay. And he is the Chief Information Security Officer acting of SBA. Welcome all. And maybe we can start off with you, James. If you can talk a little bit about yourself and what work you've been doing, and maybe a little bit about how your operations have looked over the last year.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom. So my name's James Rivera. I'm the Associate Administrator in the Office of Disaster Assistance. I've been with the federal government for 32 years. I started my career as a commercial lender and worked for 2 private sector banks before I started in the disaster loan program. So in the Office of Disaster Assistance, what we do full time, we make loans, direct loans to homeowners and businesses. And we generally do about $1 billion worth of direct loans to repair, replace what was damaged by any type of a disaster. So everybody will hear about the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the floods, and you'll get your media flash for the day or for however the event is. And what we'll do is we'll come in from a long-term recovery perspective and provide those loans to those individuals that are underinsured or uninsured in that specific case. So we go back to COVID, and I've been a senior executive since 2001, and I've been the associate administrator in the Office of Disaster Assistance since 2019. So I'm a career civil servant, been in this position for a while, and we work through natural disasters. I mean, we've hit some pretty significant ones. I have some really quick stats here. Our biggest disaster to date was Katrina Rita Wilma back in 2005, where we did about $11 billion. And we're always measured by time. It's a Government Performance Results Act goal. We did it on average about 67 to 74 days from that perspective. Then we had Superstorm Sandy in 2012. It was a smaller disaster, but if you're one of the disaster survivors, it's big for you if it's your home or your business. So we did about 2.6 billion in about 25 days. Then we had Harvey, Irma, Maria in 2017. We did about 7.5 billion in 17 days. So we're in, we size up. We have a core staff of 1,000. We size up to whatever the need is from that perspective. For Harvey, Irma, Maria, we went up to 5,000 employees. So I digress back to March of last year. From a statutory perspective, under the Small Business Act, Section 3K defines what an eligible disaster is. And we did not have a pandemic as an eligible disaster. So Congress gave us that authority mid-March of last year, and here we go with pandemic recovery efforts. So what we did is we've provided to date over 3.8 million loans for $202 billion, and we provided $20 billion in targeted assistance for grants, basically from that perspective. So what does that mean? From 1953, when the SBA started, to last year, pre-COVID, we have done 68 billion combined. So here in 1 year, we've done 3 times that amount from that perspective. A lot of it, most all of it, is technology. From that perspective, obviously, we went up from staff's very important. We went staff of about 1,000 core staff up to over 10,000 from that perspective. So, and I have a lot of stories to tell behind that, but I'll just keep it to this point here. But thank you for letting us be on this and be able to provide the inside perspective that a lot of people don't get that opportunity to see it very often.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway of your opening comments are you used 3 huge hurricanes. They were your pilot, for what you ended up doing. And I don't think anybody was planning on that one. Next, why don't we go over to you, Steve? And you are from New Jersey. You probably were some family was affected by Superstorm Sandy. I remember when that happened.
Sure. Yeah. That was certainly an issue. And, it probably still pales in comparison to what we've been dealing with
Yeah.
James and I over the course of the last year. So just maybe just jumping into it a little bit. So I'm with the Office of Capital Access, and we're the program office that had the responsibility to deliver the PPP program, Paycheck Protection Program, and my specific role is delivery on the systems data side. I've been a Fed for 25 years, started in the Department of Justice, presidential management intern, been with the SBA since '96 and a senior executive for the last 13 years. And I've really had to, been in the role of actually seeing us evolve from a paper-based organization in terms of doing our loan guarantees to now all of our transactions come in electronically. Of course, when we talk about transactions, nothing, I think in our wildest dreams could, envision what the last year and a half looked like for us. In terms of, a normal year, a record-breaking loan year before this last year was 30 billion. And that was all of our loan programs combined. And this was working through our primary partners, certified development companies, commercial banks, mission lenders, et cetera. So just in terms of scale, there was a single day during our PPP peak that we did more than 50 billion in one 24-hour period. So, if we flash all the way back to the end of March when the president signed the legislation, there were some anxious days. Certainly didn't have enough time to stand up a new system, completely develop it, something in the cloud, something that would have been a little bit more elegant and fitting of the scale. So we were kind of forced to leverage and re-engineer on the fly with our existing systems. So, all in, just to tell the story of the scale, the numbers probably tell it best, is that, in the first 14 days of the program, we booked over 14 years worth of SBA loans. So that really, I think kind of shows a little bit what we were up against. Was it perfect at all times? Absolutely not. There were some folks that had slower than normal response times. There were some challenges around data quality, lots of different things, but grand scheme of things, the number one priority we had was we were in the middle of an emergency. We had small businesses that were failing at a record rate, and we had to get funds out at a quick pace. So again, just to give you a little more idea on the scale of the numbers. So between April 3rd and August 8th, we brought in 73,000 new users to what's called our E-Trans system, which was our core loan guarantee system prior to PPP and still exists as our system of record for that program. We booked 5,000 loans per hour. We were able to, on peak processing, like I mentioned, do on one 24-hour period, 328,000 loans for 50 billion. And if you put that in scale against a $30 billion year during the times of recovery and Jobs Act, it really was just kind of a remarkable experience that we were all going through. And I'd be remiss to say it doesn't happen without a ton of collaboration. There were, just things like getting a network port open with our CIO colleagues. That meant the difference between thousands of small businesses being able to be handled on time. Working with our CFO's office, working in collaboration with James's team on the disaster side because our programs intersect. It forced us into not only new technology, but new ways of collaboration. I think in general, we've also, since that period of time, have been able to evolve. And now we're at a point where we're balancing more speed with certainty and compliance. So as the program has evolved and speed, not necessarily the need for speed has not diminished, but the importance with all the oversight that has kicked in around these programs, the importance of doubling back on compliance, fraud detection, all things around IT security have become more of an effort now. So now as we prepare for the next round of stimulus programs, it's more of a dual track in terms of our implementation between speed, certainty, and compliance. So those are just some quick things that kind of share. On the contracting side, I thought Keith did a great job of talking about how much we've done with personnel. We really also needed to ramp up our contracting apparatus quite a bit. So over the last 12 months, we've had a 1,875% increase in our lending volume, which, our contractors, that's forced us to 400% increase to accommodate that stimulus. So for us, being able to hire enough feds to bring those folks in to be able to do what we need to do, just not possible. So a ton of collaboration with our procurement office and our CFO's office to be able to ramp up our procurement mechanisms to be able to bring in the staff to handle these things. So I could go on and on, but it was an exciting and challenging time for the agency. But I think, as Keith mentioned, it opens up a ton of opportunities for us for the future.
Yeah, I don't know how many businesses were saved. I'm sure that if a lot of these businesses hadn't gotten these loans, and there's going to be some kind of analysis. I don't know what you guys have done yet. It's kind of hard, kind of early, but I don't know how many businesses you saved. So you can definitely understand the balance between I got to get the money out, and do I want to? It's impossible to cross every T and dot every I on and do the normal due diligence you normally would. And I think you guys went into that knowing that. And David, and that may be the segue into, you guys all went remote. You've totally changed how you do business. You've hired all these new people. You've had to onboard folks, and now you're handling a lot of money. How did as a security professional, how did things change, if at all, that you saw over the last year?
Well, in the beginning, you said it right, where our pilot was the 17 hurricanes, where, probably everybody knows that the SBA has always had to support a geographically diverse workforce. We have to go where the need is, right? We have to go with, and we have to go there immediately, right, to be able to respond. So because of that, we were, I would say, better positioned than maybe other federal agencies to be able to use technologies like software-defined networks, collaborative tools, collaborative file sharing, where last year around this time, our transition, while there were some bumps, we had very smooth transitions, almost 100% power. We had some scaling up to do. A lot of the technologies that we leverage are cloud-based and are scalable automatically. So that was a huge benefit. But the other side of that's on the endpoint side of it. And we had to be creative on how we're going to monitor those endpoints to ensure the same cybersecurity posture and privacy posture as we had for like on-premise people connecting. But Steve brought up a good point also, is obviously this pandemic is tragic, but we forget that sometimes not everything that comes out of the pandemic has to be a bad thing. Sometimes we learn and sometimes we innovate from those things. And one of the things that, considering my fellow panel members in the cyber world, more particularly in like the risk management and authorization world, we had to reevaluate how we did that. And what I mean is we rolled out several IT platforms in the last year that are the conduits to get all the applications in and get the money in people's hands. For those of you who might not know, the old school way of doing government risk management and authorization is basically you wait a couple of months for a lot of paperwork to be compiled and some structured control testing. That answer to either James or Steve gets you laughed out of the room during this type of thing. Maybe it was never a great answer, but it's certainly unacceptable in the last year. It has to happen soon. So while you might not be operating under perfect conditions, you have to be able to, and it's forced us to define what are the game-changing and critical things that we can put in place or measures that can be taken in 1 or 2 sprints to allow management to make a risk-based informed decision on a go-live for these applications. And I think that's a positive thing, because the old process, I don't want to say it was broken, it was what it was, but we need to be a little more responsive. I don't see that process really ever coming back.
Right. So you have all this, you're processing all this loans, we have all this disaster going on. How did you guys what was the new normal of teleworking and how did that impact you? Because I was at SBA maybe a few months before pandemic. It seemed like every cube's taken. It's pretty packed in there. And, maybe starting off with you, James, in your department, how did that, now you have the challenge of your internal folks dealing with COVID too, on top of, having to serve the American people with all these loans.
Right. So, go back to, our CIO department and our friends in the CIO. They pushed us several years ago to go to this thing called the cloud. So we don't have any bunkers to live in, and our first true stress test was Harvey Irma Maria back in 2017. As I mentioned, we went from about 800 employees up to 5,000 employees in 90 days. So you have the people, you need the equipment. How we connect, we used to go from a laptop remotely to a laptop in an office, and then we said, why are we having two laptops? So to be more efficient, we went to a cloud solution from that perspective, and we really tested it. I mean, we have capacity. Our largest center has 1,500 employees. Or 1,500 seats, and then we went. You could go 2 shifts to go to 3,000, 3 shifts to go to 4,500. The challenge with COVID is we couldn't seat anybody in these centers because of the possibility of capturing COVID. And unfortunately, we did have some unfortunate COVID situations in some of our centers, so we went remote. And with 10,000 staff, 8,000 were FTEs, and then 2,000 contractors. We got pretty proficient, and Keith and Sanjay and team, they helped us get the laptops, and we got the security thresholds, and we got everything in place. But working remotely is challenging, even to this day. But the efficiencies are just incredible. We generally work anywhere from 10 to 12 to 14 hours a day. And from that perspective, working remotely really worked well. And every once in a while, we'll see like somebody's kid running in the background, and it kind of adds a little bit of flavor to the day, because you're in a pretty stressful environment. But it's just the staff is incredible, but without the technology and not being in the cloud and not having a software as a service provider and those kind of technology leaps, I don't think we could have been as responsive. We talk about this 3.8 million and 202 billion. We actually funded that in 30 days. So it's been pretty responsive in some people's eyes. I mean, they needed it sooner versus later, but we've done our best to try to get funding out as quickly as possible.
Great. Steve, you want to add to that?
Sure. No, I think it's right. And, dealing with the workforce as we did and everyone working remotely, I would say, unlike James's situation, he was probably ahead of us with cloud adaptation and more teleworking, and his staff is a little bit more geographically dispersed than us. So we were pretty much a headquarters-based operation. So I would say that slowed us down for a period of time. In the peak of COVID, getting everyone just adjusted culturally to the concept of working remotely. So that was part of the re-engineering on the fly that we were going through. Was not just systems and processes, but how we worked together and how we collaborated and how we leveraged systems and infrastructure we couldn't touch every day. So a lot of adjustments there. But again, I think the place we're in now, we've fast forwarded our cloud adaptation, and in terms of the new programs that we're rolling out or preparing to roll out, they will all be cloud based and come with a different kind of cultural personnel approach to how we manage them. So it's good.
Well, I've been doing a lot of these over the last year, and most of the federal government is kind of like your experience, Steve. Was a big transition there, as you can imagine, and it looks like you guys just got through it, and you didn't have to go through like, oh, we're going to do this over the course of 2 years. You did it over a couple of weeks. And David, you want to add anything to what you saw either internal to your department or just what you saw across the agency?
Well, yeah, the interesting thing that's going to be to watch is people, Steve or James, I can't remember which one mentioned culture. I think it was Steve. And we're kind of being shoehorned into the culture of 100% remote work now because we have no choice, right? Managers can't realistically say, come back to work. The real question is in 6, 8, 12 months when the pandemic goes away, or this pandemic goes away, our manager's still going to be that as embracive of that 100% telework in cyber, at least, and not just in the last year, maybe the last 3 years. We've seen people leave because they were offered a similar job with no in-office commitment at all. And I think that that's going to be a competitive factor moving forward, maybe forever, that we're learning now that because we've proven we can work remotely all the time, that'll remain to be seen as whether management embraces that moving forward when they aren't forced to due to pandemic restrictions.
No, I think that brings up a good point, and maybe you've just kind of created my next question. You know, what are we going to look like when pandemic? Hopefully, everybody's getting their shots and they're getting this vaccine out very rapidly. What is the new office going to look like? Maybe starting off with you, James. After July 4th or so, when we start getting back to normal, what do you think back to normal is?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting opportunity. I mean, I'll admit I'm the first one. I'm old school. I'd like to see people's eyeballs and face to face and be able to walk around, the floor, so forth and so on. I am sold on telework. Our staff is so incredibly efficient from a remote perspective, and we've been even flexible where we allow some individuals that have children to flex time. To me, it doesn't matter to me where your 8, 10, 12-hour day is, but as long as we're getting coverage from that perspective. But I'm sold on it. The challenge we have, I think, is going to have to see what's the key to success to getting individuals back in the office. But I don't think it's ever going to get back to 100%. There's no need for that. And I mean, there's some associated cost savings, and we don't have to have as large a facility. We don't have to have as much on-prem. But I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility moving forward, especially with this administration. It's been they've signaled to us that they're going to be pretty telework friendly from that perspective.
Steve?
Yeah, I would agree with James. I just don't envision a time and a place where we go back to 100% where we are, because there's just been too many efficiencies gained. I also kind of just want to pivot off on kind of what our work would look like and how we deliver services. Kind of what Keith was talking a little bit is that, some of the new technologies that we've been kind of forced to use based on the scale and what we've been up to, and being able to layer in compliance when you're trying to use speed. It's forced us on the loan-making side to get really acquainted with things like artificial intelligence, bots, and machine learning. So I would say, quite honestly, that was not on my radar for the next 24 months before. It is square in our box now, and a big part of how we're going to be offering future programs. So again, trying to focus on the positive. It's been a tough 13 months, but maybe learning that telework can work, especially in a high production time, and also learning some new technologies that can help us do more with less.
Great. And Dave, I know you kind of started. Any closing comments on this topic?
Yeah, I created this mess.
Yeah.
Maybe one way we reimagine the whole concept of in-office is, typically people get 10 paid vacation days. Maybe we make that the reciprocal for in-office days, that the office can compel you to come in 10 times a fiscal year, and you kind of use them like sick time hours, where we come in, one day that's -8, and you have whatever the rest is left over. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's the right way, but it's a way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you all said. There's some efficiencies, but there's also how do you do a strategic session? It's a lot harder, not with a whiteboard there. I mean, I'm like an old school person, like you, James. I like kind of like that whiteboarding aspect, but you can't deny the efficiencies, and we're going to work ourselves to death in this country now. We are really efficient at working ourselves to death, I think. So got to be some balance there somewhere. We've got some poll questions, and please, I think after we do these poll questions, some of them are on the technical side. We'll kind of go through them to engage you all, but for the folks out there, please ask some questions. We've still got some time left in this panel, and I do want to take your questions. But Alyssa, do you want to come up with the first question here? and we'll just ask everybody in the audience as well. From the following list, what would you consider the most challenging to your agency? Network segmentation. We're definitely talking tech here. Protecting workloads, strict user authentication, protecting workstations and mobile devices, protecting IoT, OT, data encryption, threat visibility and analysis, security automation and orchestration. We should have done it like when I was in college, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4, something like that. But we'll just get a feel for where it is. If we can close this, let's see what we got. Okay, a little bit all over the place, as I would expect. David, this is your kind of neck of the woods. What is there anything here that surprised you? I mean,
I'm glad to see that threat analysis is up there. That's one of the areas that I think has helped us, not just, but also in the last year. As everybody knows, there's thousands of threats that are out there. We see stuff every minute, every hour, and we obviously can't focus on each one. And cyber threat intel is one of the things that I think, if I did a random poll on our team, that we're the most proud of, because it allows us to distinguish between a risk out there that isn't a threat to us as much versus one that is. Example, if there's a hacker community or a terrorist group out there that we kind of are monitoring through social media and stuff that's talking about a potential attack against the energy space, well, we're not really in that space so much. But if we see one that's discussing, fraud against pandemic relief and how to game the system, well, we care about that very much, and it allows us to focus our energy. And I think I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, talk about a little bit about. I thought it was good enough to go into a little more detail about your threat analysis team that you guys have there. I think that's kind of unique for an agency that your size. I mean, you're not the Department of Defense, obviously.
No, so it's a good question. I don't really have a good feeling of a solid feeling of which other executive branch agencies have one, but cyber threat intelligence is a bit of an art and a bit of a science. It's basically information gathering, using human intelligence, open source intelligence, social media, the dark web, to figure out and sort of be where the malicious actors are, so we can sort of see what they're doing and determine what might be coming down the road. There's a huge aspect of that also involves collaboration with the intelligence community for what they can disclose to us that they see also. And that's been very beneficial. I think someone once said that that's the difference. The cyber threat intel is the difference between cyber and information assurance.
Great. I'm going to go one more poll, and then I want something back from each of you, but we'll go to our second poll, Alyssa. And it really is about the risk. And I think this is an important one when you're trying to do good work. And it's like, how do you feel your agency's ability to calculate the appropriate amount of risk that can be tolerated? We'll see what people come up with. But it's a fine line. You got to do the mission, and at the same time, you've got to, you've got to balance that out with, cybersecurity and risk, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see what we come back with this poll. Okay. All right, Alyssa, what do we got? I think that's a B. James, what do you think?
I'll take a B.
Yeah.
So, and Steve mentioned one thing from a technology perspective. I mean, in the old days, we'd have a whole bank of loan officers and attorneys do independent checks through Google or whatever the source is. We actually, as part of our software as a service, when we did the COVID, and we're still doing it, COVID-19 lending, we used an algorithm, and it had 50 data points, so forth and so on. We worked closely with the Inspector General, and if there were any fraud components, we would refer them to the Inspector General from that. And most people don't give a shout out to the Inspector General, but we work really closely with them from that perspective. And, the auditing team, we've dealt with identity theft like we've never dealt with before. I mean, we were closely pursued. The configuration of the CARES Act didn't allow us to have some internal controls by statute, but we did our best from that perspective. We did stop a lot of fraud internally within our system, but there was fraud that got through, and we're addressing that, the identity theft and that fraud from this perspective in close cooperation with the Inspector General's office, the Secret Service, the Justice Department, so forth and so on. So there is a back end from that perspective, but it's incredible. It's a risk reward relationship. I mean, we were under immense pressure to get as much funding out, and we're still in that mode today. We still have several $100 billion left to go. So we're going fast as we can, but we have a lot of internal controls and checks built in, as we've done over those last 12 months.
Great. Steve?
Yeah, so I think square in the middle is where I voted, and I think part of the challenge that James and David and Keith and I lived through is that sometimes risk management can be perceived or misperceived by political administration as a criticism of legislation or a criticism of the program. So I think one of the lessons learned, for our, I think we've been hammering over the head with it, at least in the last 3 months, and really glad to see this administration embracing it. It's just transparency, in terms of transparency around the data. If there are mistakes, if there's fraud that's being mined, there's a lot of inspector generals, there's a PRAC, there's lots of different folks that are really watching this money. So the one thing that we've tried to do is, as James mentioned, is kind of form partnerships with the inspector generals. If we're transparent, then we can be mining the data together. That's one thing. And then, trying to be brutally honest around, the perceived weaknesses. All these pieces of legislation are done in emergency settings. Our operations are done. So, the notion of kind of brutal honesty that risk management brings to the table, I think, is something we've learned over the last year.
Yep. And David, you deal with risk management all day long, so in security. So what would you like to add to this?
Steve put it really well. It goes back to what I said 10 or 20 minutes ago about what are the critical game-changing things that we can put in place in 1 or 2 or 3 sprints to allow the program to move forward and go live with a measured and acceptable and informed amount of risk. And those steps, there's going to be release 1A, release 1B as different capabilities go through the life cycle of the program. So those elements that you put in place for the go live, they have to be repeatably supportable over many different cycles. So you have to be able to do it over and over again to continuously assure what's going on. And some of those things are simple, like, strong authentication deters a certain amount of fraud. Just doing that right there turns some people will go to an easier target. And I think that, that is an important distinction to make.
Great. And what new technology? So, we've always thrown people at the problem. We can always do that. What kind of technology are we looking at to, especially when you have the opportunity with scale, you can't bring as many people as you'd like. What are some of the tech that you've been bringing on that kind of make your job automated? Even if you haven't implemented, is Dave, and I'll start off with you, James. Are there some things? I mean, you went to the cloud. That was probably step one. Are you looking at any kind of like things maybe you wouldn't even looked at a couple of years ago? That are now kind of breaking onto the scene?
Yeah, I think when Keith did his introduction, he mentioned software as a service. I didn't even know what software as a service meant a couple of years ago. But from being able to leverage the private sector and how we do things, how things are done in the private sector, and the speed and the accuracy and the internal controls that they provide with like these bills. So the COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is very targeted. It's very specific from a bill perspective. We had this contractor that's a software as a service do it in lightning speed with really solid internal controls, and we continue to work with them. We have daily touch-based meetings, so forth and so on. that is, and it's not to be critical of the old days when we used to, it would take a normal sprint would be 2 months. And now a normal sprint is 2 weeks. So, and then we have a week of testing, so forth and so on. So I think it's changed the way we think. What I worry about is post-COVID, the expectation is you can do this level of performance with this, measure of internal controls at today's speed. For us to have to replicate, 3-4 million applications being done in 30 days, that with the next natural disaster, because we know we'll have one, that's going to be our next biggest challenge. And what it does is with these internal controls and then with these algorithms, it really, your cycle times go up. So for example, on a normal platform, I can get a turn of 5 a day. Where on this new platform, we can get like a turn of 20 per day. So it enables you to not have to have more staff and more human capital from that perspective.
Right. Steve, how about in your operations?
Yeah, very similar. So I mentioned it earlier, leveraging artificial intelligence. It was kind of a way far out plan for us, a year ago. Today, it's real. That's in normal times, we would be routing some of these loan decisions out to a center, and the center would take 10 days to make the decision. We have no time for that. AI, kind of bunkered by sampling has enabled us to do that. I think the other thing too, it's forced us to do is take full advantage of some of the federal government resources that we weren't taking advantage of before. Perfect example for us is that we needed a very quick way to root out some fraud. And we were able to partner with the Department of Treasury to sync up with the do not pay list and have an automated feed and a look back into some of their databases, doing something similar with IRS. So it's forced us to look at new technology, but also become resourceful in creating partnerships to leveraging existing data sources across government, which I think is good. One other thing I wanted to touch on that James was just hitting on a little bit too, is the period of time when we're not in this stimulus environment anymore, and something that maybe worries me a little bit is the expectation. One of the things that we're doing more with technology, we've also become a lot more expensive. The nice things about these pieces of legislation, they come with admin money that help us ramp up and bring in software as a service and artificial intelligence, but they're fairly expensive. These are expensive lifts. What does it look like for us as an agency when we're no longer living off of stimulus admin money and we get back to, we turn back into a pumpkin again and the Cinderella story's over, So that's an interesting thing, that maybe an unintended consequence of some of this buildup of technology.
Well, maybe that's where you all this IT modernization pays off, because then you're more efficient in the future, software as a service. And now's the time to rush. It's like the gold rush is, you got the money right now. It's like, how do I make it so it's scalable in the future?
Correct.
And yeah, it looks like that's where you guys are headed. And David, I know in the security side, I remember a couple of years ago, you kind of reduced the number of tools, made your business easy. I've seen some of the stuff that you and your team and Sanjay's been involved with on security. I'd like to hear what, some of the things that you guys have been trying to, you learned over the last year.
Well, look, everybody knows, I'm going to partially take my cyber hat off for a second here. Everybody knows the SBA is a small agency, right? But I think that we've learned in the last year that our mission is anything but small. And I think we suffer from an identity crisis of being called a small business administration and then only being a base of basically 5,000 people. And I kind of what Steve was hitting at before, I think that we would do well to reevaluate that, because we can only go so far with automation and cloud-based technology, but maybe we've outgrown our baseline as an agency. I don't want to get myself into too much trouble here, but again, I'll just reiterate, our mission is not small. Maybe it never has been.
No, it's pretty important. You're punching above your weight on your mission, at least, than the amount of personnel that you might have. Okay, we're kind of near the end. What are we doing we've had this last year where it's like, the battle, you're on the battlefield the whole year. What are you planning on implementing over this next calendar year, and some of the improvements that you're trying to work on in your agency, in your mission? Maybe start off with you, James.
A couple of pretty exciting things from my perspective. But we have in a natural disaster, we used to go on the ground and do a physical inspection. We actually have an automated tool now that gives us pretty accurate 95% accuracy on what it costs to repair, replace a property. It's like going to like a Zillow app that we've had a custom build from a software company that actually tells us what it costs to repair, replace based on disaster survivors saying they need 3 feet of water. The cost savings for me not to have to send somebody to the ground, so forth and so on. It's exponential. And then, before we fund a loan, we'll go do a check through that property. That's one of our biggest efforts move forward. And it also increases the speed and the accuracy of the verifications going forward. And then, as Steve mentioned, the biggest challenge we have is the delivery of service. How can we do it as fast as we've done it and continue with the strong internal controls we have from that perspective? We're not done with COVID. Our disaster declaration period for COVID doesn't expire until December 31st of this year. So we have a couple $100 billion. So we've been sprinting for the last 13 months, and we have a full year ahead of us. So we're continuing to work hard and smart and just try to see how much we can get out to the small business owners, because I mean it's a dire situation when we're having to still deal with COVID, and hopefully COVID will be soon. So they always say, get your shot, wash your hands, wear your mask, so forth and so on. So we're looking forward to getting this behind us also.
Yeah, I'll say so. Steve?
So continuing to grow out the AI components that we've been working on, and basically leveraging the technology to do something that loan officers did for us in the past, and then repurposing those loan officers to be able to do a little bit more less routine manual underwriting type tasks and be able to provide more lender relations assistance, fraud detection, et cetera. So I think more to come there. Then also, there's probably the less sexy part of it is that really trying to transition this good work that we've done during this ramp up period so that it can be a little more sustainable. How do we turn software as a service into something, multi-year? How do we leverage, how do we transfer some of the data out of these third-party sources so we can use them 5 years out, things like that. So a little bit of transition work while we're still building for what's next.
Great. And David?
For us, it's continuous training. I guess it's a good and a bad thing that, a lot of the technologies, and I'm trying to be technology agnostic here, but that we use software as a service tools, modules of infrastructure service providers. We hire people, they get 6 months of experience and they're gone because it's sought after, and not every, there might only be 2 or 3 resumes out there that has that 6 months. So to be able to sustain the knowledge within the agency and keep that aptitude up there, that's a challenge.
Now, I mean, this is a problem. You're not the only agency having that problem. That definitely is a common issue across government. Is there anything else that any of the speakers want to get out that maybe I didn't cover or ask that you think is pretty pertinent before we close this panel? This is our last opportunity. We good?
Just check our
ahead, James.
website, sba.gov. Check the website. There's a lot of great information, and we appreciate OCIO. They do a phenomenal job with the agency as a partner and as a guidepost also. So thanks to Keith and Sanjay and David and the team from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely like to echo that. A lot of the work behind the scenes maybe doesn't jump out you in the headlines. Those folks have provided tremendous support to us for this.
Great. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time and your services, country. This is going to be in a hard, HBR or something one day of all this money going out and the impact that it had. So thank you for your service, and have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Great. Next up, we are going to, really lucky here. We have a tech talk, and we have a special guest. I would consider him a very special guest. Bill Vega And Gil is the Chief Information Security Officer at Veeam, but Gil is a long time in our community. I know he worked at DOE, DHS, the IC, and in the Department of Defense. Welcome, Gil. It's good to see you again.
Thanks, Tom. Great to see you. And you can hear me just fine, right?
Oh, we can hear you. We can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
And
fantastic.
we were just talking about, security folks that used to work in government. I think you did your time. Where do you live now? Where are you out of?
We are in Chicago right now in the city.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. Miss DC though.
Yeah, I miss Chicago. I miss Wrigley Field. I would go there with my buddies, and I haven't traveled that way in a while, but I got to correct that mistake.
Well, hopefully we'll
Thank
be
you.
back to normal and have a great summer. So that's
Great. Well, I look forward to your talk.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I did have some slides, Tom, but my PowerPoint keeps crashing on me. So bear with me. They weren't that important. What's really important is, mostly the comments that I'm about to go through. And as Tom mentioned, my name is Gil Vega. He mentioned that I have a shared heritage with many of you on this call today, a lot of shared, what I call scar tissue, managing cybersecurity programs across the federal space. Today, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Veeam Software, responsible for cybersecurity, risk, compliance. But my team and I also work with our product development teams to enhance our cybersecurity offering. So it's a really, really interesting component of my responsibilities to be able to help our development teams drive cybersecurity deeper into our offerings. Before Veeam and after I left government, I was the CISO for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in Chicago. It's a systemically important exchange operator in the US. It's the world's largest exchange operator. And as we know, US fin services are constantly under attack. So lots of tales from the trenches there, as well as my time in government. In DC, I was a federal executive for a number of years. My last role was as the associate CIO for cyber at Energy. Responsibilities included cyber oversight of our nuclear weapons complex. And before that, I was at DHS. I'm a proud Department of Homeland Security alum, having arrived at Immigration and Customs Enforcement in 2007. Had a great, really fun time standing up a new cabinet level agency and working with a lot of really dedicated federal employees. Here at Veeam, I've got a lot of experience in the year that I've been here talking with our customers about security and compliance, frankly, because of my experience having worked in the government and at a highly regulated financial services company in the US. In fact, in my last role, our company was so highly regulated by the US government that sometimes it felt like I still worked for the government, if you know what I mean. So you can imagine a lot of what we just heard from James, Steve, and David, particularly about the cyber components, really resonates. And today, Veeam is really happy to partner with the SBA for today's talk. Your work is even more critical now than it was before, as you're trying to save small businesses that have been hard hit by this pandemic. So my hat's off to you, and I certainly salute all the hard work that you're engaged in. Now, we just heard from the panel about all the work the SBA is going through in terms of transformation under heavy load, that heavy load being managed by a remote, almost completely remote workforce, while maintaining a focus on security and compliance and not dismissing any of those important components. Well, that's exactly the kind of situation where Veeam helps our customers. You already know us as a leading data backup and replication company, and we are, but people back up their data for a reason, and that's really to manage risk. And since our founding, we've helped customers manage through three types of risk. There's platform risk, the cyber risk that we're all familiar with, as well as the overall data risk. And I'll talk a little bit about each one of those. Let's start with platform risk. Our customers really want to know, how can I modernize and how can I move my workloads to new platforms, but keep my data safe? And maybe even more importantly, have an exit strategy or plan just in case things go wrong, because sometimes things aren't always what they're promised, and you'll want to have a contingency plan to move those data back or over to another cloud vendor. And when Veeam started about 12 years ago, we were helping customers manage the risk of moving to VMware, which was new at the time. The company was really the best at it. It drove a lot of growth here. The company got multiple awards and certainly grew right along with the platform that we protected. But since then, we've been the leader in protecting virtual and now physical workloads in the data center. Of course, today we're taking the risk out of the same kind of IT modernization program that the SBA is going through, implementing new services on new platforms, including moving to AWS, Azure, Google, and consuming cloud services like O365, all while doing it securely. Our customers use us to move data into the cloud and accomplish low-risk migrations, as well as disaster recovery. But really, just as important, they use us to make sure they always own their data, as I mentioned before, making sure that they still have control over that data in the data center. And our customers know that they can keep critical data on-prem or multiple cloud platforms as well. Again, we help our customers manage the platform risk. And we've done a pretty good job at it. Veeam has well over 400,000 worldwide customers. The company continues to grow fast, even with the disaster of the COVID-19 pandemic last year. The company has definitely grown. We've been in the Gartner MQ Leaders Quadrant for the last 4 years, and we've really led in the ability to execute in 2020. But we also help our customers manage cyber risk, which has really become the top operational risk for a growing number of companies and government agencies. Our ability to protect critical data many times a day and to keep those backups safe from attackers has literally kept a lot of our customers in business over the past couple of years. We've also led for over a decade now in the ability to restore data instantly, which is what the admins who use our tools love about Veeam products. And this helps you to avoid long outages after bad things happen. We all know bad things will happen. It's not a matter of if, but when, as we like to say in the security world. And those things have helped many of our federal customers avoid long outages and disruptions to the mission as well. So we manage platform risk and we manage cyber risk. What does it all add up to? It's about managing data risk. The SBA's incredible success with the CARES Act has had data at its core. And small businesses that have been helped in the past year by the SBA, they're increasingly in the same position as having data at their core, at the very essence of their ongoing survival. And no one is better at making it easy and cost effective to take the risk out of managing your data than Veeam. If you'd like to know more, you can visit veeam.com and take a look at what we have to offer. We continue to look forward to partnering with the SBA and with business and the businesses you serve now and in the future. And Tom certainly has my contact information if there's anyone out there that has specific questions about any of the capabilities of the Veeam software suite, in particular, some of the cyber capabilities that I'm sure you'd appreciate. I'd be happy to respond to you directly, either by email or a phone call. So again, thanks for having me. It's great to speak to a great, focused, dedicated group of federal employees. I salute your work. And now I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hang on, Gil. I'm not going to let you go that easy. Especially, and thank you for that. And we'll distribute a whole bunch of information about you guys. And thanks for being a partner. Question I have is, David, on the last panel, and you've been in and out of government. How do you think you can incentivize federal security folks to stay in government, at least for a time, right? You've worked for a lot of different agencies and worked in the private sector. Any quick suggestions you would have for us? Yeah,
and it can't be about money. Obviously, there's civil service rules and so forth. But the thing that when I talk to young people, I just mentioned this. When I talk to young people at colleges or interns that come to our company, I encourage them to seek a role in the federal government, because there are things in the federal government, like managing through the CARES Act or managing the security of the nuclear weapons stockpile in Nevada, that you just can't do anywhere else. And I think if you can, I learned this at the Federal Executive Institute in Charlottesville, if you can manage in the federal government, you can manage anywhere. So my advice to people that are looking for incentives to stay in government service is to seek out those really interesting opportunities, test themselves, and get themselves ready for whatever the future holds, which could include an executive role in some federal agency as well as, financial services.
Great. Thank you for that, Gil, and I
Yeah.
appreciate your service. That was a great talk. And next we have with us Paul Moxon. And Paul is the Senior Vice President of Data Architecture and Chief Evangelist over at Denodo. And Paul, there you are. How are you doing? Let's see, we got you, Paul. All right, Paul, can you speak? Have a little trouble hearing you. You know how these things are. Okay, and here we go. All right, we're playing this video. It should be coming on right now. Having a little technical difficulties there. It's like a pandemic. We've learned not everything goes exactly perfectly. There we go.
Thank you for joining me today for this tech talk entitled Accelerate Migration to the Cloud Using Data Virtualization. Andy Warhol once said that everybody's going to be famous for 15 minutes. As I only have 7.5 minutes for this tech talk, I guess I should introduce myself as the almost famous Paul Moxon. I am the Senior Vice President of Data Architectures and Chief Evangelist at Denodo. Now, in this role, I talk to many organizations around the world, both in the private and the public sectors, about their data strategies and their data architectures, etc. And invariably, the migration to the cloud and managing that subsequent hybrid architecture are always one of the features of these discussions. Everyone knows about the benefits of moving to the cloud, the flexibility, the on-demand scalability, to spin up systems or compute capacity and then quickly shut it down again when you don't need it. There's also what I call the benefit of leveraged innovation, taking advantage of all the innovation work done by Amazon and Microsoft and Google, especially in the area of advanced analytics, machine learning and AI. So simply being in the cloud allows you to take advantage of, say, NLP applications, voice recognition, chatbots, etc., that are available as services on the cloud itself. The cloud journey for most organizations is not a one and done event. It's a series of stages that they go through as they transition more and more systems to the cloud. And this diagram illustrates those various stages. Now, in this tech talk, we're going to concentrate on the transition or migration to the cloud stage, and a bit on the resultant hybrid architecture that's a consequence of this transition. When the systems are migrated to the cloud, there are a number of options, and these are 3 of them that come from an annual cloud survey that we do. The cloud survey for 2021 is actually in progress as we speak. There is actually a 4th option that is not on this slide, and that's retire and replace. And that only had 7% of respondents actually selecting that option, which shows we're not very good at retiring old legacy systems. We just create new ones. Now, refactor, re-architect is the most popular, but it's also the most intrusive and the most risky. By intrusive, I mean that it has the biggest impact on the users of the system. Take a data warehouse example. There might be hundreds or even thousands of reports and dashboards running off that old legacy data warehouse. And the impact of migrating this to a modern data warehouse on the cloud, and also modernizing the data model at the same time, that's the refactor part of it, will be quite widespread. So how can you make it less painful for your users during a cloud migration? One very successful way is to hide these changes from the users behind an abstraction layer. The client tools, the applications access their data through the abstraction layer and not directly from the data sources. And this isolates them from the changes. The abstraction layer, in this case, the data virtualization platform, is inserted between the clients, the reports, the dashboards, the applications, etc., and the legacy on-premise data warehouse. The data virtualization platform exposes the data warehouse data as is. It's a simply pass-through operation. The data looks the same to the clients, they're just getting it from a different data source. These reports and dashboards and applications do have to change, but the change is to get the data from a different data source, in this case, the data virtualization platform, rather than the original legacy data warehouse. Typically, these changes are minimal. You can then create the target schema, in this case in a Snowflake cloud data warehouse, and then expose that schema through the data virtualization platform. If the schema in Snowflake is different than the one in the original legacy data warehouse, you can use the data virtualization platform to make it look like the old schema, effectively reverse engineer the changes. Finally, you copy the data from the legacy data warehouse to the new target in bite-sized chunks. For each data set that's copied, you can test it out on the target, in our case, Snowflake, and make it live simply by reconfiguring the data virtualization platform to get that particular data set from Snowflake rather than the legacy data warehouse. The reports and dashboards still get the data from the data virtualization platform. The fact that it now comes from Snowflake is transparent to them. If there is a problem when going live, for example, performance is not good enough or the data has errors or something like that, then simply revert back to the legacy data warehouse just by reconfiguring the data virtualization platform to get the data from there rather than Snowflake. Once the data set is live and is okay, then you simply rinse and repeat with the next data set. In this way, the data virtualization platform acts as an abstraction layer, isolating the users of the data from the changes in the physical data infrastructure. This abstraction layer gives the users the ability to pick and choose what tools they want to use. So there's a flexibility of a BYOT, bring your own tool strategy. It also gives IT the flexibility and freedom to modernize and optimize the data infrastructure without worrying about the debilitating impact on the users of that data. And this is what happened with the US Army Materials Command. The US Army Logistics Data Analysis Center, LDAC, maintains a state-of-the-art supportability analysis and lifecycle logistics decision support software tools to support the purchasing programs of the US Army. They needed to modernize and consolidate the legacy Oracle systems and move to a modern data lake architecture with zero downtime. Using data virtualization as an abstraction layer to isolate the users from the changes, this simplified the program for the users with their 1,000 plus PL SQL reports and de-risked the program that consolidated from more than 20 systems down to just over 6 in a period of 18 months and saved the US Army millions of dollars from its budget. So to summarize this brief tech talk, cloud modernization programs are complex, and often they fail to deliver the expected benefits to the agencies. And data virtualization as a core component of a modern architecture can reduce the complexity and risk of these migrations, these modernizations. The users access the data through the data virtualization platform, and the data virtualization platform takes care of getting the data, whether it's physically stored in the cloud or on premise. And the resultant data fabric that is created with this data virtualization abstraction layer is more agile and more adaptive for the future needs of the agency as well. And with that, we're out of time. Thank you very much for listening to this brief tech talk. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it interesting. Thanks.
Okay, these lightning talks are quick, and we get a lot of information out of them. And thank you, Paul Moxon and Denodo. I still remember at the beginning of this pandemic, Denodo put together their platform and accumulated a lot of data sets from around the country that helped in the COVID response. So that always stuck out to me, that they were contributing to the community, and we helped them publicize that. So anyway, we're here. We're at the home stretch. We're going to go to our last panel. If we can get Elias, Luis, Craig, and Roger on, we'll just dive right into it. And we're going to be talking about one of our favorite things since pandemic is workforce transformation, which is obviously on everybody's mind in every agency and every company. So fantastic. We're getting everybody on. I see Roger.
Hi, Tom.
Elias, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll, let's see. There's Craig. And Luis, you're on. We don't have your video. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to correct that. But anyway, Luis, can you hear me? There he is.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, your video is not on. You may have to restart your computer. I know that happens sometimes, especially when you're jumping from Teams to Zoom to WebEx. Sometimes that's a little thing, but we have a little time if you want to do that. If not, we'll get you on the audio. There you go.
Can you see me now?
I love it. You got
There you go.
you got the SBA workshop behind you. Like it's like this cool thing. I guess it's a virtual background. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do some quick introductions, kind of like what we did last time, and then we'll dive right into it. I know we've got a lot of material to cover, but maybe we'll start off with you, Elias. So I have Elias Hernandez, who's Chief Human Capital Officer, Office of Human Resources Solutions over at the SBA. And how are you doing today, Elias?
I'm doing well, Tom. Thank you so much for asking. And I just want to say thank you to Sanjay Gupta, our Chief Technology Officer, and the members of the ATAR for the invitation to take part in this very important event. It is an honor for me to have an opportunity to speak to you today about the Small Business Administration Human Capital Program. So I'm looking forward to the talk.
Great. Well, happy to have you. And we also have Luis Campudoni. Did I get that right, Luis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And he's Deputy Chief Information Officer, Office of the Chief Information Officer at SBA. And is that a virtual background? That's like the coolest SBA office I've ever seen. I don't know.
It is a virtual background.
Great. And where are you out of?
I'm actually at the headquarters office right now, but I am based,
Oh, wow.
my home is over in West Virginia. So I commute every day.
Fantastic. And we also have Craig Jennings, Information Technology Specialist at SBA. I don't know. I don't know what that background is. You might be able to take that as some kind of prison or something. I don't know. What is that?
That is the Trade Fair Palace in Prague. It's where the National Gallery is in Prague.
That's fantastic. And how are you? Where are you out of today?
Unfortunately, I'm not in Prague. I'm in Washington in my home office.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least, we have with us Roger Garland, who's Director of the Processing and Disbursement Center at SBA. And where are you out of today, Roger? Are you actually in the office?
I'm in the office in Fort Worth, Texas.
Okay, in Fort Worth, Texas. Love Fort Worth. We did a partnership with GSA last year, and what a city! They really they were really welcoming. I really like it down there when I had the opportunity. Good place. Okay, we're gonna get right into it. Maybe we can start off with you, Elias. Let us know a little bit about what's happened over the last year with this pandemic and how you've had to deal with it, and then we'll jump in with the other folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. I heard, the first panel speaking, and I think you heard so many good news stories with regards to the SBA mission and some of the work that we have been able to do in the organization. I'm going to speak to you from the standpoint of human capital, right? And I will start by telling you that the success that we have had in the Small Business Administration with the Human Capital Program, in particular during the pandemic, could have not been possible without the support of our Chief Information Officer and the OCIO organization, who has provided, us with 100% support. And a lot of the successes we have had in general are also attributed to the new business processes and technology that we have been able to deploy in the organization in support of human capital. The mission of our agency has never been more important than it is today. You heard James Rivera and Steve and David speak before, and we during the past year, we really have tripled the size of the workforce as a result of the pandemic, the national disasters, and the national unrest throughout the nation. And we have been able to do that once again by virtue of utilizing technology. When we got hit with the pandemic, the first reaction we had was okay, how are we going to be able to keep our employees safe and at the same time be able to deliver on the mission of the agency? And I will tell you that the work that has been done in our organization with respect to the investments that we made in information technology really paid huge dividends. Also included some of the minor investments we've done in my organization. And I'll tell you, when I tell you what this investment is, you're going to say, "Oh my God, Elias, really? That made that big of a difference?" And I will tell you that it has. The automated web TA system, they help us, do the time and attendance, through electronic means, also provide us the capability for us to place the majority of our workforce on telework schedules and telework agreements electronically. So when we got hit with the pandemic, we changed our delivery model from a face-to-face model to a virtual environment. And that particular investment, along with the investment that we made in IT, really prepared the organization to be successful during the pandemic. And we basically transformed the organization from face-to-face engagement with customers and face-to-face engagement with employees to a virtual world where we have taken advantage of technologies such as Zoom, like we are doing now, a lot of the MS Teams capabilities that have been introduced to the organization, where at the beginning it was like a huge change in the organization. And now I think the organization has really adapted to technology, where it's going to be probably very difficult for them to kind of transition back to the way it used to be. So I'm going to stop here. I don't know if you want to ask me any specific questions. I can give you data and statistics with regards to how we have tripled the workforce size in the organization, but wanted to acknowledge that we have been successful because IT.
Fantastic. I almost committed the cardinal sin of not taking my mute button off. You think after doing enough of these during pandemic, I would get that straight. Thank you for that. We will get back to that question, Elias. Okay. And let's go with you, Luis. Love to hear a little more detail about what you guys have, gone through over the last year. It's probably about as challenging as anybody's career could be with everything going on. Glad to have you here today, by the way.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity of being here. Well, to be perfectly honest, I started with SBA in January. So coming over from DHS, it was a drastic mission scope change. So from the department level mission over at DHS and focusing now on the small business administration, loan capabilities and disaster efforts, it was a major change for me. But to be perfectly honest, I came on board in the middle of COVID, and I was impressed with the capabilities that were already implemented, because I practically was an onboardee at the time. So I was able to come through the process of hiring fairly quickly. I was able to come and join the team and see that the technology capabilities that have been implemented that are driving the agency in a stable way in the response and the maturity levels that we are in response to COVID are not different at all from where I came from DHS. So a lot of collaboration capabilities, a lot of flexibilities when it comes to accessibility of systems, even for the remote workforce, a lot of engagement from the staff as well in response to the mission and to the needs. It was something that it helped me practically come in fairly quick and put my feet running in the ground and kind of support the agency to the next step, trying to reach that enhancement levels as we continue in this COVID mode. What are the next steps that we need to continue to do to provide services to the country?
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, onboarding in the middle of a pandemic, that would be an experience. We'll save that one for a little bit. I think we got a question around that. And let's go to you, Craig. I'd love to hear what your experiences are as an information technology specialist.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing actually. I was in the office mostly full time, and then now we're all sent home to virtually work. And I think one of the things that strikes me is how quickly SBA was able to turn into a virtual organization. I mean, it was impressive. I mean, like we maybe for a few hours you might have had VPN issues because everybody in the country was trying to soak up VPN. So, but once we got past that, we opened up the spigot on a whole bunch of collaboration tools. People shifted to digital workflows. One of the things that the administrator has requested is a central meeting place where all the intra agency communications about the CARES Act and about COVID in general could take place. So we stood up a virtual forum for that, where we had shared documents. It was a place to virtually meet, and we got that off the ground pretty quickly. I think all the employees were very quick to adapt digital tools. We had on hand, I think, a pretty talented trainer who was able to show and explain constantly, like, here's the tools, here's what you do with them. We had trainings, all the time about how to access this stuff, and it was pretty good. I think everyone caught up to speed pretty well. The other thing I think I noticed, and I think the rest of the world has noticed too, that we've become so comfortable in using this way of communicating now. There's probably a pretty good discussion to have about the upsides and downsides to this, but on the one hand, we all recognize where we are. We're at home. Things go on in the house, and we've sort of adjusted to that and just recognized, like, this is it. This is how we work. And through all of that, we have, I think, maintained our productivity pretty well. I mean, I can speak for me personally. I was able to, really focus in on some stuff that maybe I wouldn't have been able to at the office with the usual distractions. And based on conversations I've had with other teams, is that everybody else is stepping up, doing the thing. We had to make a lot of stuff happen at the IT level and at the program level. All that, I mean, that was a lot of work, and we did it all remotely. Any downsides, being remote, just sort of evaporated pretty quickly. It was pretty impressive. I can keep talking. I've got a few more thoughts. I don't know if I need to transition over to the next speaker though.
Hold those thoughts.
Sure.
How about that? We'll get to them, and we'll get you an opportunity in case I mess up and forget something. And now we have Roger Garland. I mean, you're purely in the business, Director of Processing and Disbursement Center. And boy, you guys have been working overtime this last year.
Yes,
how's this been for you? Yep.
Our normal operation here in Fort Worth, we have generally 480 people. We have surge capability to 1,500 here and another 250 in our Sacramento surge location. On December 2nd, we were at 7,376 people. There's no way that we could have done that without telework. And probably our two biggest things that we had to deal with was onboarding virtually and then training virtually, something that we had never done before. And picked it up, got it going, moved it on. But it saved a lot of money. No need for more brick and mortar to house people in. No flying people out to Texas to onboard and then to train, and no per diem, no cars, no hotels. So it's been very, very good for us, and the productivity has not suffered at all. In fact, in many cases, it has improved using telework.
Now that makes a lot of sense. So, what were some of the challenges? I'm going to ask this for everybody. What does the new normal of teleworking look like at your agency? How did this affect you on a day-to-day basis? And besides having to reach all your constituents, maybe just how it affected your area personally. And then Elias, maybe starting off with you.
Yes, Tom, I will tell you, I speak probably on behalf of the Office of Field Operations, who are actually the people on the ground supporting the entrepreneurs. And the one aspect that I do know has become a small challenge, right? It is recognizing that not all small business owners have technology, are well-versed in technology. So how do we reach out to those communities, in many cases underserved communities that don't have the capabilities that we have, right? So we have to have like a hybrid approach in our delivery model to ensure that, that yes, in fact, we can reach as many people as we can utilizing technology, but at the same time recognizing that there are probably thousands of small business owners, if not more, that do not have that capability. So we have to figure out a way to keep our employees safe. There were employees that are, by virtue of the criticality of the mission occupation that they hold in the organization, still, ended up, coming into the office safely with social distancing and all the protocols articulated by the CDC. But we still have to kind of balance that and continue to deliver the service while taking advantage of technology, also recognizing the need of all the small business owners.
Right. How about you, Luis? And maybe give us a little bonus coverage of how it did it. Was it similar experience at DHS?
Well, when COVID started at DHS, it was a very sudden transition. But we were able to go from 100% on the office to 100% telework, and practically maintain the department, the backbone, and the entire executive staff of the front office without any impact to the mission itself and to the operations. There are transition efforts that comes to mind, and I can see it here also as being successfully implemented. When a situation like the pandemic hits, you start considering, of course, the safety of the workforce as a top priority. And then understanding that now your workforce is dealing with personal situations at home, but they also have to work. The schools closed and everything closed, so flexibility was one of the major things that we have to work as senior leaders, and understanding the different case-by-case situations that some of the employees might have. But at the same time, providing the flexibility is also encourage the workforce to actually increase the performance. Here in SBA and at DHS, I saw that from an 8-hour workday that you would normally experience in the office now, without asking the workforce, you suddenly get 10-12 hours of work done on a daily basis, and it's because of that flexibility. People appreciate that comfort. So that was a major benefit that I've seen here at SBA. I also saw it over at DHS. But in the same way, the pandemic was that game changer, that last drop in the cup that actually forced us to engage in a more serious ways in the transformation and innovation of many technology areas or many implementations that probably didn't have the same level of priorities before. Simple things like implementations of tools, collaboration tools, or migrations to cloud. Pandemic hits, and that suddenly accelerated. And seeing that the workforce comes together and is able to do major implementations across enterprise and across different program offices in such a fast way, it's an amazing accomplishment. So it's a great and impactful change that you see from a workforce perspective. You kind of miss like you said in the previous panel, the whiteboarding session, especially on an IT side. Then you can bring engineers and architects into a conference room and start drawing and maybe do a little walkthrough to your operations center or the data center. And now you kind of depend on documentation and graphics to actually do that over Teams or whatever collaboration tools. But you adapt and you continue the mission, and you see no impact. Even if you're not able to do the typical whiteboarding, we can continue to deliver the mission. So been great.
Great, thank you for that. And Craig, you alluded to it a little bit about how it impacted you. How do you collaborate with the people that you haven't seen in the office for a long time? Is it changed a little bit? But I'd love to hear your perspectives.
Slightly. I mean, actually, it's kind of interesting because we have a team member who actually onboarded while we were away. So our team member has never been in the office, and we've only worked with him virtually. So I don't know what that's going to be like if we ever see each other face to face. It's going to be weird. We also have we have term hires that were hired with COVID funds to do COVID work, and their term, and so I think it's a year or 2 years. It's entirely possible they will never see the office, which is kind of a striking thing. And you stop and think about like what that opens up a ton of possibilities with respect to recruiting and talent. We have proven we can do the work and deliver and work functionally very well virtually. So now our talent pool is nationwide, right? I mean, you start thinking in that direction, that we're not tied to DC anymore, or the metro area. It's pretty interesting to think about that. Me personally, I've always been, fine with the remote presence stuff. And I think we do it well enough. And it's a matter of having, I guess, these sort of unofficial agreements about how you work together, or how you share documents. I'm really pushing the shared Word documents. We're not emailing these things around. We're just popping them up and, editing together. We have our periodic stand-ups, in video. So yeah, I mean, it's different, but it's a good way to work. You could probably, again, make arguments one way or the other, but it's definitely been a time. And definitely, I think after everything is said and done, I think the argument about productivity and teleworking is done. I mean, we have finished that. Like you can do this. This is not a question to be asked anymore.
Great. And Roger, I actually looked it up. A call center is a office set up to handle large volume of telephone calls, especially taking orders, providing customer service. What happens when there's nobody at the call center and everybody's telecommuting? How did that experience go?
Well, ODA does have a call center, and they're all remote also. So it was a change, but it was something we were forced to do, and we did it. Telework has gone from an employee benefit to a mission critical fact of life.
Right. No, I agree. Have you seen productivity? Is there been measurements in that area, or it's just kind of something we had to do anyway?
Well, we look at, we're a widget shop, and so productivity is something that we measure every step of the way. Yeah. And we have people that, are doing 10 times what they were doing before. And we have people, of course, that's why we've gone down from 7,300 to 5,600. We have people that just aren't cutting it doing telework. So we move on to the next group of people and get them trained, see what we have. And one of the things is we try and keep the best of the best when we downsize again. And this opens the market to nationwide. And so we can really, I think, improve our workforce by getting these remote workers that are the best.
That's a lot of widgets. Yeah, that's a lot of widgets. You're removing 10 times the widgets, and I think that's a good way to look at it. It's very measurable, your business. So, and I always found out when I had a call center, the lower performers, it's pretty easy to measure them. So you're better off getting rid of the lower performers for whatever reason. Good stuff. Luis, you kind of came into this, but I'm going to start off with Elias. How about onboarding? Like I'm used to going in and getting my PIV card. I go to the headquarters HQ of the agency. I go through this whole process. They take my picture. How is that? How did that experience go for each of your department? Maybe we'll start off with you, Elias.
Yes, no, thank you so much. Besides, the PIV cards and the pictures and all of that, it also relates to the equipment, right? The onboarding process, as we mentioned before, used to be face-to-face. People used to show up at the headquarters or in the particular locations to go through the onboarding process. We have been able to automate that, where onboarding is completely electronically. but also an important part for all of us, Tom, when we started, the search and hiring, was to make sure that we had coordination with the CIO, the facilities, the security office, and all the organizations that were going to provide the support for the employees coming into the organization, in particular, the employees that were going to be hired on virtual locations, right? And at the beginning of the search, we, just like every organization, we did experience, a little bit of, delays, for lack of better words, in terms of equipment coordination. And that was a lesson learned that we immediately put processes in place to ensure that we had the equipment ready for the employees when they came into the organization. And not only that, also making sure that we were able to mail out the equipment to the employees in the different locations. So I know that Craig mentioned, this opened up all kinds of possibilities for the future, how we hire, how we retain employees, how we attract top talent to the organization. And that is something that we are actually already working on in terms of identifying strategies for us to be able to attract the top talent that we need in the organization, irrespective of where they at throughout the country, right? So, but I will tell you, it was not just only the computers and the PIF cards. It was also how we're going to train the people, how we're going to deliver the modules of training electronically, and be able to provide quality training to our workforce before we put them in the line of support.
Great. And Roger, I don't know how many people you hired thousands of people, and we've had this process for years. How did you guys overcome some of those challenges?
Well, we had never done virtual training before, and so that was just that was the hardest thing to get started, and make it effective. So it took a couple of months to hone the skills of the trainers that we had. But once it got up and going, it works as well as on-site training now. It's nice to be able to see somebody's face and how they react to something, but we can get by with it.
Yeah. And how about, onboarding all the people with your PIV process? How did the onboarding of that affect you guys, since you brought so many people on?
Well, the PIV process is something that we had struggled with from the very beginning, but we get waivers on the PIVs, and that helps us a lot getting people on and getting them up and running.
Great. And Luis, I have to ask you, since you were hired during this process, and anything you're bringing over from DHS, how was the experience? What did you learn? Yeah.
So, I was employed at DHS when COVID started. So I know that when I started at DHS, orientation was a new employee orientation was a process that would take probably about 3 days, maybe 3.5. But coming over to SBA, right in the middle of COVID, being able to go through orientation the way that Elias' team has implemented the whole process, and practically go through that in less than a full day, and practically be able to onboard and be able to even down to your picture being taken remotely, and minimize the time that you have to go to the office to actually pick up your PIV, if you decide to do that, because it can actually there's other ways to that. It was a complete difference of operations for me. Coming on board and understanding the CIO operation and what the workload is. I can give you an idea. Between November 2019 and March 2020, before the pandemic started, our usual onboarding support for new hires and onboarding efforts was no more than 100 per month. But when the pandemic hit between late March and April of 2020, that month alone, we practically supported about 900 onboarding activities on that month alone. And then since then till today, it has not dropped from 200. It's been anywhere between 200 and 350 per month, probably peaking at about close to 500 with in the middle of COVID and the presidential transition, that was another activity that kind of surged up in the middle of COVID. But the support provided to Elias' team, the collaboration between the teams has never been better. I think that I've been at Customs, I've been at FEMA before in the headquarters. I've never seen an onboarding process as fast and as expedient as SBA has it right now.
That's fantastic. Okay, we're going to hit a couple polls here and engage the folks out in the audience. So we want to just we've covered a little bit of ground here already, so maybe we can ask that first question of the audience, which is a mix of government and industry. Let's put this up. What's the biggest challenge your agency has faced during the pandemic? Right. We'll give it a few seconds. It's like at ATARC, we've gone from like 4 to 10. We're in a nonprofit association. Many of our folks have never met in person. I think I've met everybody in person, but not everybody else has met. I mean, we're about due for a team building effort in the second half of this year. It is a little different than what we're used to. So what were our poll questions, answers, Alyssa, to that? Okay. Okay. Hiring and training new employees. Yeah, that's I know at ATARC we had to rethink the way we do things. Collaboration. So we still, I think, in the last couple of panels we've had that. Any surprises there? Any comments from anybody? I don't know if it was too surprising. Okay, how about this? Let's go to the next one. This is a good one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much did the change to maximum telework affect your agency or organization, let's say? All right, we'll be interested to see what happens here. All right, we'll give it a couple seconds. Alyssa, what do we have? It pretty much is evenly distributed. I'd look at the 26%. That to me kind of sticks out at least a little bit, right? Yeah. Any comments to that? Is that surprising? It seems like doesn't seem all that surprising to me, but Elias, anything stick out there for you?
No, not really.
Yeah.
You don't know.
No, I agree. So we'll go to the last poll. Sometimes these polls surprise you. Sometimes they're right along with everything that we've been talking about. Let's go to the last one real quick, and then we'll move on. How satisfied have you been with your agency's ability to switch to remote work? All right. All right. What do we have, Alyssa? We'll give it a couple. Well, we'll give it a second or two. I get dinged sometimes for going too fast on these things. All right. There we go. There's the future right there, I think. The present and the future. So it's kind of funny. I think it was you, Roger, or maybe it was you, Luis, actually. Your actually onboarding process could not be easier. It's gotten easier. Instead of getting harder, you think intuitively going in as, oh, what are we going to do about onboarding folks? It's actually made us do it easier. So I think that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about some collaboration tools. I think we're not quite there. We got that on one of the poll questions, like how do we collaborate? How do we whiteboard? And maybe starting off with you, Elias, how are we trying to collaborate? I know besides using Teams, have you guys looked at doing anything? You said you kind of changed the training up. How can we look at maybe improving collaboration in our agency?
Yeah, Tom, we have done a lot of collaboration with our employees during the pandemic. in particular, we deploy a program in my organization that we call it HR cafes, which are weekly meetings with employees to provide information with respect to the human capital programs and the different changes that are coming in every single time that we get a new legislation that provides changes to leave, to parental leave and things like that. So we have really truly maximized MS Teams as the capability for my organization to engage with our employees. And as a matter of fact, we are getting ready to have a major town hall meeting tomorrow with all the employees and the administrator using MS Teams as a capability. So I would tell you that our training has become more effective in terms of participation, and also has allowed an opportunity for us to have more flexibility on when the training is going to be delivered and depending upon the needs of the organization. So I don't think that I have any bad stories to tell you other than the initial transition that we had to make with the organization to basically get them used to using the system, getting used to using the chat lines, getting used to attaching documents, through MS Teams and presentations. So I think we have become very well versed in that area. And I will tell you, in OHRS, obviously we are not IT professionals, but we have really, really maximized that capability to our advantage. And initially during the pandemic, we probably were the one of the few organizations that was really kind of ahead of the curve in terms of the technology, in terms of delivery of training and onboarding and all those things. But then throughout the months and with the training that the CIO provided the workforce, which was outstanding, everybody kind of came to the same level of proficiency in the organization.
Right. And Craig, I'm going to go to you. You're doing DevOps, you're doing different types of things. How did that all change a little bit? Have you had brought on any new tools to help you collaborate for IT?
Not new tools, and I mean, well, we actually did get teams spun up. That happened during all of this. We're using Zscaler and some other things that just make remote work easier. But I'll say the non-exciting thing about this is establishing processes, official and otherwise, to be able to do that collaboration. Like I mentioned earlier, you just have to have an agreement with your team on how you work. You have to have expectations. I mean, email can kill you. You can totally get lost in Teams. You spin up 20 different teams within Teams, all of a sudden you're lost. You don't know where it is. You really need to make that effort to do the organization and the management of all this stuff. And it's different, but you just have to do it. And I think that's been kind of like my biggest realization is that, when you are outside the office, you can't just yell at someone to get an answer, but the answer is probably there virtually, and you just got to locate it. And keeping all that stuff straight, you put these things here and that thing there, and it works a lot better that way.
Right. Roger, do you want to add anything about the collaboration tools?
No, I mean, we use Teams one-on-one. We use it for group meetings. Our team leaders are required to have weekly meetings with their people. Individually, we do how you did a certain file and why you did it, and they can walk through it, and everybody can see what everybody's looking at. It just has worked out very well.
Great. And Luis, how are you guys communicating any differently in IT?
No, I think I'm going to echo what Elias, Roger, and Craig said. Teams has become that unified collaboration tool that we practically use for everything. We can do information sharing. We can share our presentations. We can do team building events, and we can do kind of like a brown bags, and whatever it is in your mind, we can actually accomplish it in this remote environment. We can accomplish it through this platform. So, interesting is that I recall when collaboration tools like Teams was something that was mainly used by agile teams. for Scrum meetings and stuff like that. But it wasn't something that it was broadly accepted across agencies or the environments that we work until pandemic hits, and suddenly we need something that that can allow us to fulfill as much of the activities as we did in the office. And now we have this platform, and it has become our day-to-day office. And another thing that from a flexibility but secure way is the implementation of additional tools, so that we're able not to communicate internally, but communicating with some of our partner agencies and some of our our vendors that support us, and also the community that we serve with the country. So we expand that portfolio and be able to communicate through Teams, through Zoom, and some of the other platforms that are out there in a secure way. But it also enhances the way that SBA has adapted to be able to communicate across all ranges.
Great, great. And I remember like week 2 of pandemic, yeah, an agency, I will remain nameless, came out with some policy that is like, well, you can, if you're going to be online, you can't have your kids running around. They have to have babysitting, and it was just like an unrealistic policy. How have the policies? I'll start off with you, Elias. How have your internal policies evolved to accommodate this new work environment?
Yeah, Tom,
Yeah.
we have a lot of flexibilities. One of the most beneficial flexibilities that we have put in place in the organization in support of our employees is the flexible work schedules, where if you have a personal situation at home with your dependent care or your children's being in school at home, you can basically change your work schedules depending upon the situation, and either start earlier or start later or work later on in the evening, also to include Saturdays. So we provided that flexibility early on during the pandemic, probably ahead of some of the other agencies. So that was something that we deployed right away. And because we did that, a lot of the employees have really provided some feedback to the leadership team, whether it has been through the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey or some of the other surveys we have done in the organization, demonstrating that we really took their personal needs and the needs of the organization in consideration early on during the pandemic. And it has been that way since we started back in March.
Yeah. How about you, Roger?
Well, we had a very restrictive telework agreement when we first started this. And then as Elias's team put out the directive, we changed and really saw a big benefit in the change. The productivity of the individuals upticked because they could work when it's best for them to work, and they didn't have to worry about other distractions. And that I think that worked out very well.
Yeah, nobody's sticking their head in your office, right, Craig? Craig, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I mean, I will say, I think the HR team, the human resources team, has done a terrific job with the policy stuff. Like that was, I mean, they really got stuff out quickly. They were hitting the issues that needed to be hit. And just, like, again, just watching all this happen through our virtual command center when this was all going down, it was just sort of a boom, boom, boom thing. And just, just the ability to kind of say, like, adapt to reality was pretty remarkable. I dare say in a federal agency, how quickly we got to, like, okay, this is how we're doing it, and let's get to work, people.
No, it's fantastic. And Louis, you experienced all this stuff in transit back when you got onboarded in January. What are your impressions?
So the flexibilities of telework policies and how these have kind of been modified to be even more flexible because of the pandemic across the federal agencies have actually provided a great deal of benefits to the workforce. telework before was something that was kind of like a religious approach. We had this structured process and these requirements. And, I remember that at one of my previous places, I had to, I couldn't have not even of course, this is policy interpretations, pictures and stuff in the background and stuff like that. But, now with the pandemic, now we're talking in an environment where, when school closed and suddenly, you got kids, playing in the background, and sometimes over the shoulder of someone, you get someone popping up, you would see about everything. But, we, with the flexibilities, we were able to accommodate, single parents' needs, workers that had their own personal situations and stuff. And still, like we've all been echoing, accomplish the mission and increase performance across the board. Like I said earlier, you would normally get in the office a work schedule of about 8 hours a day, and now you see people plug it in at 7 in the morning, sometimes at 6 in the morning, and it's 6 and 7 p.m. It's like, oh, I'm just catching up. I'm here comfortable at my house, and I'm just catching up on emails. So it's just something that it comes out of our own will, and it increases that performance and accessibility and availability of the workforce.
Great, great. Well, this panel just flown by. Last question will be, what do we see if we do this panel again next year? What are some of the new things that you're working on that, what's our offices going to look like? Is it going to be similar to now? Anything that might change? What are some new ideas that you think will be by next year? Maybe starting off with you, Elias, some of the things you're working on.
Yeah, Tom, most definitely. We started already the conversations with the Office of Personnel Management through the Chico Council, and obviously in partnership with GSA, because GSA do own, the structure, the buildings, the leases and things like that. But what I would think it may happen in the future, Tom, is a different footprint for the workforce, and opportunities for many agencies, including the Small Business Administration, to reassess where the employees are throughout the country. Some of the places where we perhaps may be able to deliver the work on a virtual modality. Also, the recruitment process is going to probably change, to provide more opportunities for remote locations and full-time remote employees, as opposed to the way it is now. And I think, we have a great opportunity to not only be able to save the government a lot of money, but also to attract the best talent that we can attract for the federal workforce. So if we talk next year, I'll be glad to share with you some of the things we've done in the organization to continue to deliver at the highest level on the performance of the agency, but at the same time, still care for the needs of the employees and be able to use the different tools that have been provided to us by the Office of Personnel Management to really to be able to deliver on the mission of the agency, irrespective of where the employees are located.
Great, great. And how about you, Roger?
I looked at the same thing. I think our footprint is going to be a lot smaller. We're not going to have to set up for surge, even though that's what our business has been, because we can do it from their home. I think we'll be able to attract better people and keep them longer by offering telework as a permanent solution.
Great. Greg, you want to add anything?
I've actually been really curious about what that looks like in a year or two. I can, there's going to be a hybrid approach, right? Sometime in the office, sometime out of the office. What does that mean? What does that look like? Obviously there's a footprint question here, but are we going to contract the footprint, or are we going to keep it the same because we need more space now because we've decided 3 feet, 6 feet of space is how we need to live? Do we have agreed upon days? Is Wednesday our day in the office day so we can do the meeting day? And then the rest of the days are like this, all these sorts of things. So I'm actually curious too. I'd like to have a conversation with myself a year from now to see how things turn out.
Great, great. And how about you, Luis? I think you get the last word on this and the panel.
Well,
make it count. No pressure or anything.
No, so I'm going to take this from a security and resiliency perspective. We've talked about how we reacted to the pandemic. One thing that is obvious and is well known publicly is that along with the pandemic was the increase of cyber attacks and cyber risk across the board on federal agencies, and kind of forced us to increase and be more strategic about the controls and configurations that we put on our infrastructure. So a year from now, 2 years from now, I see us being more strategic about that as we continue to move applications to the cloud, as we continue to reduce the physical infrastructure and anything that we have in the office, and make it more accessible to the workforce and to the people that we serve, but also making it more resilient, more secure, and more available. And while increasing security, but making it easier for accessibility and ease of use, so that eliminating a lot of the need to be in the office, but being more strategic about our infrastructure and how we protect the data that we have in it.
Great, great. Well, Luis, that is the last word. Thank you, Elias, Roger, Craig, and Luis. This has been a great discussion, and have a good rest of the week. Thank you. We'll do this again. And last but certainly not least, we are going to get our man of the moment, Sanjay Gupta, who's the CTO of SBA. He had a really big hand in putting this all together. He had the main hand. I think he gets kind of some MVP votes out of this. But glad to have you, my friend, and thanks for doing this with us.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And certainly I want to do just a few closing remarks. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay, so just a quick introduction for myself. I'm Sanjay Gupta. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. I joined the SBA from the private sector about 4 years ago. I was brought on to lead innovation and transformation and modernization at the SBA. As all of you just heard from all of our various program office leaders, the last 12 months have been quite a journey. And mind you, this journey is still going on. If you've not come to the end yet, like you heard from James Rivera, their program for disaster loans is authorized to the end of this calendar year, and so the other programs. In short and summary, we've processed nearly $1 trillion in loans and capitals for the nation's largest ever economic recovery initiative. And it has been, two words that come to my mind are overwhelming and tumultuous at times. And we could not have done this, what we've done so far, without the SBA staff that stepped up, the SBA leadership, and the support and collaboration of our key partners. There are really two takeaways that I think it kind of summarizes the discussion that you all have heard so far. First and foremost, the role of the technology plays in any organization has become increasingly evident in the last 12 months to be really critical. And that doesn't matter, it's across the globe. It doesn't matter if you're in the public sector, if you're in the private sector, not-for-profit sector, academia. Organizations that had a more modern and a more current technology infrastructure were in a better position to respond and react to the global pandemic. We at the SBA definitely felt that difference. The modernization we had put in place in the SBA and the innovation that we had led over the last few years benefited in our ability to scale up exponentially almost overnight. And you've heard the story so far. Number two, again, a resonant theme is around the fact that the staff can and is being productive in a virtual and a remote-only environment. I think it's beyond doubt by anybody's imagination that telework is not necessarily productive. And there's many, many benefits, but sort of if you take from a standpoint of an organization standpoint, you heard from Roger and others talk about we didn't have to invest in the physical footprint of the office spaces and the time that would have taken and the cost it would have incurred to do that, while we at the SBA were surging up from a staffing standpoint to nearly 3 times the staff that SBA had. And you also heard from some of the panel members talk about the productivity in net aggregate fashion has probably only gone up. And you also heard about the fact that we've been able to attract and retain and hire more talent, which did not have to be bound by a locality or region specific, because we're no longer limited to that. So we hired folks in the last 12 months who are all across the country. So that talent pool for us wasn't available because of the fact that we are in a remote only situation. So in closing, I really want to thank Tom, yourself, your staff, and ATARC for giving SBA the opportunity to talk about our experiences over the last 12 months. I also want to thank each and every one of the SBA panel members who took the time out of very busy schedules. Mind you, all of these programs are currently underway. And this week is also a very important week for the SBA because some of the programs are launching this week as well. Hopefully the audience got a perspective of what went behind the scenes in delivering the nation's largest ever economic initiative so far. Finally, just a reminder that this journey is not yet complete, as the learning, innovations, and delivering on the vital economic program continues. Thank you and goodbye till the next time.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for your service and for everybody else that I've had the honor of being on the panel, starting with Keith in the last couple of panels. And that's all the time we have today. I'm going to leave it with Sanjay's words and we're good. Next week, we've got, or actually tomorrow, excuse me, returning to workplace using IT for modern hybrid work environments. So we're going to continue the discussion with some different agencies and look forward to having everybody on that. Should be pretty daggone good. But that is all we have today, and everybody have a good week.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.